Okay, well, thank you. This is our panel for today to help us think through some of these issues. So we have Tami Pyfer. She is Governor Gary Herbert's education advisor. We have Aaryn Birchell. She is the 2018 Utah Teacher of the Year. And then we have Brad Asay, who is the president of the American Federation for Teachers Utah, which is a teachers union that represents educator professionals in the state. Their full bios are in the program, so go ahead and check those out. So let's start by talking about some of those graphs that I just mentioned from the 2018 report, which shows that the most influential factor in teachers leaving is emotional exhaustion, burnout, and stress. What policies do you think that we need to change, get rid of, in order to overcome that particular reality? We can start here with Tami.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for having us here. I'm not sure that's on.
Do I need a green light or a red light?
Go, red, stop.
There we go, okay.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for having this forum. I appreciate everything the Sutherland Institute has been doing, especially in the last few years, regarding education. There is a lot of stress, emotional stress, and secondary trauma that our teachers experience. I appreciate Representative Bishop talking about how schools are different and how our students are quite a bit different today than they were when he was in school, when I was in school. My daughter is a special education teacher, and she's a curriculum director right now in a charter school. And the students that have come through her classroom and the really difficult and sometimes heart-wrenching problems they bring with them to school can take an emotional toll on teachers who not only are trying to deliver instruction, teach children how to read, how to do math, social studies, civic responsibilities, but they are dealing with a whole host of other things that children bring to school with them. A real simple example is kids that come to school hungry have a hard time focusing on the task at hand. Kids that come to school because their dad's in jail have a hard time focusing on the task at hand. And the list could go on. And I'm not saying that all of our students are like this, but we have an increasing number of students who come from difficult situations. Some of the policies, some of the things that we've looked at in the governor's education plan or our education roadmap have come to us from teachers in the field who are asking for more supports, more psychologists in the school, more mental health supports, more training on how to do trauma-informed practice, more outreach to parents and people that can do that outreach to parents that are supporting what the teachers are doing with parents, but can also wrap their arms around students and situations and help parents acquire the different services or the needs that they may have. And so that's one example, I think, of what we can do. This past session, the legislature passed increased funding for mental health supports in the school, $16 million this year, which will go to $26 million next year, ongoing funds. And those will help shore up the programs that are serving these students in the school and will shore up the support that teachers are being given when it comes to dealing with some of these very difficult situations.
Thank you. Thank you, Aaryn.
Well, is it on? Okay. Well, I am a current high school English teacher, and so I get to live this reality every day. I also get to make a choice every day of how it's going to affect my day. I get pretty emotional because I love these kids. And I think many teachers feel the same. I'm not unique. I'm not especially skilled in that area more so than others. I am a normal teacher. I think the changing demographics are definitely influencing the further burden and stress and burnout that we're feeling. No question. I would just echo everything that Tami has said. I guess I would like to confirm as well as echo. As a high school English teacher, I get to read their souls. I get to read their writing. And many of those students use that opportunity to share some of their greatest difficulties. It's hard for me to express to you what it's like to pray all night long the child is there the next day. Does that create burnout? Yeah. When you love 200 kids and know that they're not getting the kind of needs met that they have, that I can't take care of all of them, that I can't fix it for all of them, that creates the inherent problem of what do I do with that knowledge? What support systems do I have as a teacher to help that child receive the mental health services? How do I convince that parent that this child is not just kidding? How do I change the social structures of racism that are very much a reality still in our society? And honestly, I can't take it all on. But we, society, can take that all on. And I see some incredibly exciting things happening in conversations in education, in conversations in my small professional learning communities of 3 teachers. I'm seeing exciting conversations happening with our state legislatures who are seeing some of these needs and giving some of that funding. The support will help the teachers. But I'm also finding that many teachers don't feel that support. I feel blessed. I have a great principal who supports me and lets me have a lot of autonomy that lets me be successful. Not every teacher has that. A lot of families are falling apart, and so we become the pseudo-family. And we can never replace them, but some of these systems can help provide that trauma-informed practice that can help those kids work through their trauma. Secondary trauma is real. And there are some times that I need a counselor to help me through my trauma, because when you take on to love a child, you take on some of their trauma as well. So I'm not giving any direction, I'm not offering any solutions, but I am going to confirm that that is the reality.
Thank you. And if I could have one quick follow-up actually to Aaryn. So in reading about some of the press that you've had about being Utah Teacher of the Year, you've also shared that you have experienced those feelings of burnout like you are here. So you've gone from there to being very successful. What resources, culture, what did help you become successful?
I was raised on a ranch in Jensen, Utah. And we're not quitters. That doesn't mean I don't contemplate my own and my own family's needs. But I think I had to make choices, and some of those choices were choices that said I have to find the balance that allows me to be more successful. I have to let go and let God. I also have to advocate. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting in this chair today, because I'm pretty passionate about advocating for the needs of my students, but also advocating for the needs of teachers. Kind of one of my catchphrases as I was participating in many of my Utah Teacher of the Year experiences was, if you take care of the teachers are going to take care of the kids, because we're going to do that no matter what. But if we don't take care of our teachers, they're leaving. And that means there's no one there to take care of the kids. So what's helped me? I have incredible friends. I have a great professional learning community that kind of checks up and helps each other. I had a friend who was a fellow counselor at the high school. So, when I am trying to find a kid who left a suicide note in my community on my desk, I call her like, what do I do? 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 And she helped me get through some of that trauma so that I could help that kid through that trauma as well. I have a lot of support systems, but not everyone has. I have a really, really calm and wonderful husband. I have a lot of things that are systems in place, but not every teacher has that. And so that's what concerns me. I have a lot of support and a lot of autonomy, but not every person has that. So that's why I'm going to keep talking about it, and I'm going to keep asking for it, and I'm going to ask for supports for families, because if families are getting the support that they need, then that translates into better opportunities for my students. I'm going to ask for, if we have more early childhood intervention, we can do some things when it's a baby that will have rippling effects into the life of that child for the rest of their lives. And we can't just make education start kindergarten. We have to start providing the family systems that are going to support those families to create the environments that are going to become the rippling environments for that child for the rest of their K through 12 education. So these are some of the things that I see as helpful for me personally, but I also feel like they're helpful for others as well. And I think you have to sometimes find what you're looking for. And if you're looking for the amazing things that are happening every single day, you will find them. It doesn't mean that I'm denying that there aren't those realities. We have to deal with those realities. But if you find what you look for, and so I do look for those moments of brilliance and success and hope and flash of inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you. Brad, I know this is something we've chatted about, your thoughts on burnout and stress for teachers.
Yeah, we have. So I'm in the schools often with professionals. I'm going to put a little different spin on it. Thank you for your comments. It's a reality of what happens in the classroom with our teachers is we're expected to be everything for society, oftentimes where we have to take on those loads, help those kiddos through a lot of things. I came from Ogden City School District where I spent my career teaching at Mount Fort Junior High, one of the highest impacted schools in the state and the district in the state. And yeah, that was a part of it. Loved every minute of it, cried with them, went through everything that you've gone through. But one thing that needs to be in place policy-wise, we hear a lot about teachers, but we often forget in all these conversations, and it really surprises me. So I'm an advocate as a union president for support staff. You have a lot of PSRPs in the classrooms. You have bus drivers. You have secretaries. My wife runs Valley View Elementary School, and Roy is the head secretary. When she's gone, her principal is so grateful when she gets back. We have a real need for policy changes with those support staff. They come into a school, and oftentimes they are put to 29.5 hours. And that's purposely done because the Affordable Care Act, they don't have to have benefits. And that's used often by districts to save money. And I get it, we're limited on funds. We see some great increases for teachers. You know, we've seen some great things happen. And it's getting better. Do we want more? Of course, as Congressman stated. But you know what, we have support staff that are making $10 an hour and they have no benefits. And they are just as valuable in that classroom in that school. And they leave. And they are just as valuable to those students. I don't know if you all liked your lunch, ladies. I love mine. They were some of the kindest people. But I have a hard time building them up when they don't have any rights. They're at-will workers. They're not under contracts. They don't have benefits. And so we see that there needs to be some changes. If we're going to take care of the school and the students as a whole, then let's take care of the system as a whole and not just single some out. Oftentimes, staff, faculty, different groups, and I can speak from this as a union, are pitted against each other. Oftentimes of, okay, well, we're going to pay this money here, we're going to take it from here, things like that. So yeah, money is an important part. But also, staff do not feel, as I've gone to my constituents leading up to this and those questions, again, checking in with them, saying, I'm going to be on this panel, what do you want me to share? And they're like, we need a voice at the table. Oftentimes, I lobby full-time in the legislature on behalf of these folks. And there's great task forces that are formed all the time, both at the state level, state board, all those things. But oftentimes, especially at that legislative level, teachers are never consulted. It's always, oh, well, we talked to the superintendents. Oh, well, we talked to the principals, or we had an administrator, or, you know, school board members. But rarely do I ever find a teacher, and in higher ed, professors or staff, ever invited to those tasks to give their input and to give their things. So I think those are some policies need to change. Is you have to get with the folks that are on the ground, in there every day, working with them. We do have a lot of insight, and you know what? We can run a school pretty well if you will give us the autonomy to do so.
Thank you. So this is another question centering on the report and actually deals with this very topic. It suggests that an area for further attention for teachers in a place where they're not satisfied is their influence on school policies. So how can we incorporate more teacher feedback and influence on school policies? What can that look like? We can start with Aaryn this time.
I understand why we're often not invited to the table. It's logistics. It's who's going to take care of the classroom while we take the teacher out of the classroom. I get it. I felt that a lot as the Utah Teacher of the Year because I was gone a lot. I had an amazing sub. I'm really good at lesson plans because I was a substitute teacher for 12 years, so I know how to do good lesson plans. But I understand that it's just easier to just let them teach, and we'll ask people who kind of know them. That's unacceptable because it's too easy. I don't think it would take much to get those voices, and I think we have the technology that allows it to happen. I mean, when I sent my kids off to college, we could FaceTime. We have Marco Polo, because actually, getting a college student and my schedule at the same time, like they're up at night, I'm not, I'm going to bed. It's not that hard to have like a little video that says, here are my thoughts about this, send. Watch it whenever it's convenient for you. We have the means to do this, but do we want to hear what they have to say? And I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. If we really want to hear what they have to say, that means we have to follow up and do something about what they have to say. I think that there are a lot of times we have conversations where people listen to us, absolutely. But then they go and do what they wanted to do anyway. Satisfying their conscience, saying, well, I did talk with teachers, but this is what we decided what was best for them. We talk a lot about teachers. We don't talk a lot with teachers. And so I think that that's actually made a problem where we like to demonize teachers. We like to make them the scapegoats of some of the societal ills. It's really easy when there's a tax bond issue going up to just say, oh, those greedy teachers. Just read any comments after any educational thing in the Salt Lake Tribune or the Deseret News. We get a lot of flack. And that lack of respect starts from the top as well. And so if we're willing to have those conversations, we have to be willing to say, I believe you when you say that we don't need to teach to the test. I believe you. And when you say, oh, but writing doesn't show up on the ACT test, this was a conversation. It's not going to leave this room, okay? Writing's not on the test anymore because we can't pay for it on the ACT test statewide. So we're just going to make sure that grammar is primarily what you teach in your curriculum. There's 6 pages of my Utah core curriculum, and I think that writing's pretty important, but it's not tested. We're not accountable for that. So just teach a little bit of writing, but mostly focus on this. Like, these are the kind of conversations people are having because it stemmed to funding, it stemmed to reputation, it stemmed to the grade that we're giving to schools, and some of these are the things that are public, and we shame schools, and that shame is transferred to the teacher. And so I feel that as an English teacher, there are 10 English teachers in my high school. Half of our score for the high school comes from English and reading. That means 10 teachers have the most responsibility to make sure that the students are doing well in the school. How do we share that responsibility? How do we get the message that this is a shared responsibility? It's in policy, it's in the publications, but is it in the practice? And so those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Go to Brad next. Yeah.
Most of our teachers and staff, anybody that works with kids in the classroom, are working 60 to 70 hours a week in some cases. All the time, I'm like, hey, there's a task force, or can you do this? Can you come? Can you help out with this? Do you want to meet your legislator? I can arrange for that. And they're like, okay, you're going to come and grade my 110 papers tonight. So you're right. Logistically, it is difficult. But oftentimes the burdens that are on educators to get everything done, to make sure that they're doing their job, to have the lesson plans the next day. But another thing is to crunch all the data and do everything that they have to have for reports and to be accountable for each one of those students. Don't allow them for any time to advocate for their own profession. And they do need voices out there. We try to do the best that we can, but we don't free our educators up enough for them to do that. That's why you have strikes. That's why you have walkouts. Is it builds up to a point that it's like enough is enough, and then you have wildcat strikes. People will walk out because that's the only way oftentimes that they feel that they have a voice, is to be out there and as a collective group to be heard, and they hit the streets. That's because that's the only way they can get time oftentimes. So policies that change that, fix, give our teachers some time. One personal day a year doesn't cut it. Or having to use your own sick leave to go and do any advocating, but oftentimes we're honest. You know, I'm not going to call in and say, I have a cold, and then I show up on the TV. Bosses don't like that very much when you use your sick leave to go out and advocate for your profession. And you're given 1 to maybe 2 personal days a year to do that, to go spend time down at the legislature and meeting with people. So there's just not a lot of time to do that. So we could open up more time for that to happen. We can stagger schedules, so maybe there is a block of time that they could have 3 hours to go work on something. But another thing that also happens with policies is there's policies out there with boards of education that teachers cannot talk to board members or legislators. In some cases, it's frowned upon. If it's not explicitly written, it is discouraged. So there is that.
Thank you. And so, Tami, you obviously have a unique background. You worked for the governor's office, the state board of education. You've been in sort of these governance positions. What policies do you see?
So there's a couple of things happening, and I have not heard that some school districts might have policies as Brad described, because that's what I tell teachers every time I visit with teachers, is they need to get to know their legislator. They need to get to know their school board, their local school board, and their state school board. And we challenge teachers to do that, to get on social media. We've got some really cool things happening right now with the Hope Street Fellows. And that's a group of teachers that they have, I think, a 2-year cohort. We have some here today. Oh, but my friend's on the back row. And do we not ask you to get involved? You'll see in the paper they write op-eds, and they're very well done and very well informed. And these are the kind of things that we need to see more of. And it's growing. That movement is growing. I feel like it's a teacher's responsibility to invite not only their legislator or their local or state school board member, but get the Rotary Club president there, get the Chamber of Commerce people, get them into your classroom to see what you're really doing. So that's one movement that I challenge teachers to take on, and I challenge administrators to support them in doing that. Teachers also need to run for office. We've seen in the last 5 years that I've been involved with the governor's office, teachers being elected to the State Board of Education, teachers being elected to the legislature. And I cannot tell you the difference it makes when there is an education bill being debated on the floor and things are being said about what supposedly is happening in the classroom, and you have a former school counselor stand up and say, actually, I was in the situation just 6 months ago. That's not how it works. Or a teacher stand up and say, actually, that's not how it works anymore. That might be how it worked when you were in school. That's not happening right now. And they make a huge impact, an oversized impact, actually, because of the teachers and the educators that they represent. And so just as every other organization, attorneys or home builders or developers, they get their constituencies to run for the legislature, educators need to have their constituencies run for the legislature as well, and that may mean some creative job sharing. And the active educator, or current educator that I know in the legislature right now, has worked out a special schedule with her district administration. One of the recent hires has moved from a school district into a university setting. And then some of our teachers that are in the legislature are retired. It makes a world of difference. And we can't just wait for other people to try and represent us in the legislature. We need to represent ourselves. Thank you.
Great thoughts on that. Final question that will relate back to this report. Congressman Bishop also spoke a little bit about this, but evaluations of teachers, how that ties in with assessments and accountability in the state. There's a lot of frustration over that, also listed as one of the areas where teachers are least satisfied. So how can we go about improving that? We'll start with Brad this time.
Oh, great. I'm not old and cranky yet, Congressman, so I have to be more careful than you do because I'm still actively working with folks that I don't want to offend anyway. This puts me in a really tough spot. So I came from a turnaround school, and if none of you are familiar with turnaround schools, the Darden School of Business, University, I believe it was Virginia, came into my district, and we were a turnaround school. That was an interesting experience for us as faculty. From coming with a good relationship with my administrator, working with them, I loved my administration in cases early on in my career. I could go to them if I was having a difficult time. They were true teacher leaders. They would help me. They'd come in. I'd say, hey, I need another set of eyes and ears, things like that. And it was great. It was this one-on-one relationship that I had. After we went into the turnaround program, I called them the clipboard brigade. I had 30 people in my classroom with clipboards watching everything that I did. I got deaned for bulletin boards, and I was an art teacher. I had their art hanging up all over. I didn't have time for bulletin boards. I was hating student art. Oftentimes, curriculum was different, but there was a set thing on the evaluations that needed to be done, and it was a lot of pressure. I forgot things. I was supposed to do 35 or 40, I can't remember what it was, choral responses, where I was supposed to be asking questions, doing direct instruction, things like that. And my students were all working on their individual art projects, and I'd forgotten that. And the sweet person that I knew from the district came up and said, Mr. Asay, you forgot this, and I don't want to have to not mark you down. And I said, okay, what did I not do? He said, we need choral responses. And I said, okay, how many? And she's like, well, 30 would be good. And I said, okay, how long do I have to do that? And she's like, 10 minutes? So I said, okay. I did my signal for junior high kids. I said, students, 1, 2, 3, I need your attention. They all looked up. I said, who's your favorite art teacher? And they all said, Mr. Asay. I said, there's 45. And in a half hour, I was on my prep. I was in my principal's office getting talked to about what choral responses are and working with those that were evaluating me. Now, evaluations on credit, because I know I've got Sid back there in those. You know what? Evaluations have become better. I do hear that from our teachers, that they are more constructive, that they are getting some good feedback, and especially working with their colleagues and evaluating each other and having extra eyes and ears. So it has improved, but there is a lot of pressure on teachers to perform. And then on top of that, your test scores are evaluated if you're a core teacher. And then those test scores are posted. And you're really looked at as, the psyche is, am I a valuable teacher? Because you know what? Those things I don't have control over, like those young folks that came hungry to take the test, couldn't make it, things like that. Technology, as we know with the new testing system in RISE this year, causes frustration with things breaking down. All that adds up. And I have teachers that are literally on antidepressants, having to take leave to go and get counseling. Trying not to get emotional. I'm trying not to. I had a colleague who was on paid administrative leave being investigated about a few things because for many reasons from students. I kept on telling him, hold on, he's been on paid administrative leave since March with all the pressures of teaching, and he killed himself Monday. That's the reality of teachers. They are struggling with their mental health, with keeping up, keeping their family together. And you know what? They are leaving the profession. My old son, 2 semesters to go at Weber State, was going to be a teacher like his dad. Has a child on the way. He said, Dad, I can't do this. Went and joined IBEW, the electricians union, in an apprenticeship so that he could support his family. And I said, you would have made this through. And he's like, you always taught me not to be on government assistance or church welfare. I have to be responsible, and I can't do that. That's realities of teaching. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We'll go to Tami.
I want to put just a different lens on it quickly. Often it's not the teacher evaluation program. It's the high stakes that have been attached to teacher evaluation. And those high stakes weren't necessarily attached by the federal government. and they weren't attached by your local school board, and they weren't attached by the state school board, but they've come down through legislation from our own state legislature. And so when you draw those lines back to, for example, school grading, which has had, a lot of fallout, trying to reduce the performance of a school down to a single letter grade, that's very difficult. And so it's, to me, it's not necessarily the teacher evaluation system or whatever. It's the high stakes that were attached to it. And those are the things we need to remedy. And back to my previous comment, a lot of that can be remedied by getting the right people in the state legislature who have a better perspective on those things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of great ideas. And I do not fault a lot of the policies and the laws that have passed because they are well-intentioned. I absolutely believe that there are good people who are trying to do something to solve a problem as they see. I do think that sometimes we don't spend the time to look for the unintended consequences or the amount of funding that mandate actually requires or the human costs. And I'm grateful that oftentimes they see some of those things and they make some changes. It just takes a couple years sometimes to make those things happen. I understand that sometimes the person who wants to talk the most gets the funding. But even something as simple as, let's not make students accountable, but we're going to make the schools accountable on the very same test. There's an inequity there. Let's have a shared responsibility. Let's have a community responsibility. Let's not just make it feel like it's all in the backs of just a handful of people. And if we can kind of transfer that into these community responsibilities and fund some of those community efforts that ripple into the cultures of our schools and the supports of our teachers and our students, we're going to find that we're going to be doing what communities have always done. Human beings from the beginning of time are collaborators, and when we collaborate together and when we take our different strengths and we work together, we literally move mountains. We certainly go through them. And we can be part of the innovative change. But when we just kind of assign that group over there is going to take care of it and the rest of us are going to walk away from it without the support systems in place, without the funding in place, we see some problems. Absolutely, we need to make this not just a secondary profession. I will fully admit I'm a secondary profession. My husband's a wildlife biologist, though, and they get less pay than teachers. So his master's degree is not doing a lot of good either. But we have a great quality of life. We hike in the mountains all the time. But we need to make the teaching profession attractive to these kids who want to make a difference in this world. And we need to let them do that. We need to make it so that the time is not just the time of teaching, but how tragic it is to be a teacher means you also have to have a side hustle gig as well. That, you either have to coach or you have to work at Walmart. Or you have to have a spouse that also will help pay the bills. If you can't make it happen, then it's hard to justify, I guess, the other things, the stress and the burnout that comes with it. And I would say if teachers are paid more, they won't need that second job and their stress levels will go down considerably. If you're not working all weekend long and you get to rejuvenate every weekend, you're going to come back your full capacity self rather than the drained one that's already exhausted come Monday morning.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have one final question from me and then we'll move to audience questions. So this is titled Innovations in the Teaching Profession. So we'll actually start with Tami, but if you had one change, one innovation that you could have in the teacher profession, what would that be?
Oh, gosh. I'm going to go back to a lot of the things that we talked about when we put together our education roadmap. And that is having more opportunities for teachers to progress in their careers while staying in the classroom. And Representative Bishop talked about this. The governor's talked about it numerous times, about maybe some flexibility in their schedule where they can coach, they can team teach, they can advance their career while still doing that thing that they got into the profession for, and that's loving the teaching of our young people. And I would love to see more innovation there. It is happening on to some degree in various districts, but I would love to see that sort of be par for the course. That you know that throughout your career, if that's what you want to do full-time and you want to stay in the classroom, there's a place for you, and you're going to have more opportunities. Salary-wise, you're going to have a better salary because you're going to stay in the classroom doing what you love. But if you reach out and maybe you're in one of your professional learning communities, your PLCs, and you've discovered this love for coaching and you want to do some of that while keeping your foot in the classroom, we're going to have an opportunity for you to do that. If you'd like to be an administrator and still teach a class, we're going to let you do that. And just that flexibility piece, that's what I would like to see more of. It is happening. I would like to see more of it happen.
Thank you.
I'll follow up with that because that's what happened to me. I was hired as a 3/4 time teacher because I wanted some of the flexibility of the things that I was already doing in my family and in my community, but I wanted some of that flexibility, and I was given that flexibility, and that I truly believe allowed me to become the teacher I am today. Something that I'd like to offer, I don't know about the teaching profession, but how we fund education. So often it's based and it's inequitable. So a lot of times it's based on property values, and so our poor areas stay poor, those districts stay poor, our rich areas stay rich. You know, when the PTA fundraises in a rich school district, they make $10,000 on top of the extra money that they have. When a poor school district fundraises, they're really excited if they maybe get $500-$600 to run their PTA program. And so we see these inequities, and we're perpetuating them. And a lot of us are pretty comfortable with it because it sounds fair. It sounds fair that, well, everyone's tax structure is pretty much the same, and everyone's based on their property values. That sounds very fair, but it's not equitable. And so we need to start having different conversations that fair is different. And just like every kid needs something slightly different, we need to start changing the conversations from let's do everything the same for everybody, and let's start having the conversations that say let's give everybody what they need. And those needs are different. I mean, think about your own family life. That 2-year-old in the family needs a lot more time and attention and food, different kinds of food, right? Then the teenager in the family, that teenager needs more autonomy, that teenager still needs some supervision, but it's gonna look different. And so we're giving both of those kids what they need, but it's not the same. And so I would ask that maybe of our tax structures as well, that we start to look at how, and this is gonna change a lot of people, because a lot of people in power are the ones who like being in the rich areas, and they like what they have, and they wanna keep it that way. And the people who are poor don't have the power, so they don't have the voice, so they're not getting it. But if we can change, especially for our students of color, if we can change that, we are going to see incredible improvements, because that 20%, that's kind of our area that we need to improve on, that's where it is. So start working on that 20% and make it fair for them and equitable for them, and we're gonna make some changes that's going to improve everybody's education.
Thank you.
So innovation is strongly encouraged. Innovation takes differentiation of your curriculum. It takes knowing your students and the individual needs, because you're the expert in the classroom. And as was brought up earlier by Congressman Bishop, innovation is fine and great and encouraged unless it gets in the way of the testing schedule and the lockstep curriculum. We want you to innovate. We want you to be creative. We want you to know those students' needs, everyone their individual needs. Oh, by the way, here's the testing window. You should be on this unit at this time at this date. You cannot be innovative. You cannot be creative with your students that you know as the professional in that classroom, and work with your parents that come and volunteer in that classroom and do these really great stuff that the kids love, because oftentimes it's looked at as fluff and it may not meet the schedule because you have this formative assessment this time, you have to do this, you have to get ready for your end of levels, we have to do this practice test, we have to be in the lab at this time to use it at this time, this is the only time that you can get in the lab. We need the autonomy as professionals to be the professionals in our classroom, to be able to meet the students' needs, and not as many restrictions so that we can be innovative.
I just want to follow up with that. I was looking at the mandated assessment schedules just in my district, and I was shocked by the realities of some of these schedules. Kindergarten teachers were mandated for 17 assessments. 17 for our youngest students that were mandated. They had to be on pace. 17 in a school year. And on a high school, we have 1. And that's what we're doing with our kids. These mandated, formative assessments, and because of all the funding that comes with that, because of all the accountability that comes with that. So we can change some of those things. Kindergartners don't need 17 mandated assessments.
Are these coming from your district then?
Yes.
Okay, so these.
Yeah, they're not always state,
They're not
but they
coming from the
but
state.
they're not coming from the
or
state.
your-
But they are definitely in response to some of the pressures that
The high
they feel,
stakes that
the
have been
high
put
stakes that have
on
been put. So they're
various-
kind of like, we got to make sure these kids are ready. So we got to do another assessment here, and then we got to have another assessment here. So, but I just thought, 17. And one of my best friends is a kindergarten teacher, and I was saying, I'm so sorry. When do you teach?
Thank you. Okay, well, we'll move to some audience questions now. So I think this one might be best geared towards Brad, although anyone can jump in.
Okay, here we go.
Much of the heavy workload on teachers is due to additional requirements from Common Core. It says CC, I'm assuming it's Common Core. Why haven't the unions or associations taken a strong stand against Common Core?
Good question. Oftentimes, it depends on where you're at. I know there's a lot of national movements with national union that haven't, responded too much to Common Core because we do oftentimes like the consistency that of some kind of structure to look at, but we also like the autonomy that's within that. Common Core gets bounced around a lot. I get questions all the time and calls of, well, everyone has to follow the Common Core. Well, we follow the state core that's there, and we have standards, but within those standards, oftentimes we can be creative in how we teach within those standards. So Common Core to me, and working with my colleagues, never really stood in the way of what we were teaching. We had a lot of autonomy just to teach and to do what we want. And you know what? The standards were a standard to look at. I was never, when I taught social studies, even though it was a core subject, it was testable, I still had the standard, the core for the state, and I followed those standards. So oftentimes we have found, and I'll just speak for AFT Utah in that because I can't speak for other states because I'm not involved with other states as much. Here, we haven't had a lot of complaints from my constituents about Common Core or any core standards standing in the way of how they want to teach. I get most of my complaints about testing and the things. But as far as the cores go and being able to see what those standards are, they're pretty easy to meet those standards and teach to them. So we haven't had a lot of complaints about core.
Yeah, I would add to that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. I think that people heard Common Core when they first came out, and there was a lot of fear-mongering associated with that. We need to kind of separate the reality from the fears of worrying what it might turn into. But these are standards. These are not curriculum mandates. And I think there's a big difference there. I think people think that they're curriculum mandates. And I believe that some school districts have perceived that to mean we're going to buy this program. I didn't want to name any particular company name. And the district would say, we're choosing to use this program to help us, our teachers, to all teach the same, to make sure that all the kids are getting what they need, but not every district does that. So there's still, I feel there's a lot of autonomy on a local level. We just have standards that help us to know that we are getting our kids where they need to be. And no one's afraid of that.
Yeah, you'll find we're
okay with rigor. We're okay with getting our kids where they need to be.
You won't find a lot of teachers out there oh my gosh, I'm not following the core standards that was set by, national core standards. None of my colleagues have done that. We don't even think about them. We look at the standards, we know our content area, we teach within that. And we don't actually look at them a lot.
Thank you. All right, a question about technology. So among the teachers that you know and work with, is there more interest or more resistance to adopting technology in ways that may change how teachers spend their time? How is technology improving, how teachers spend their time? Is that freeing them up, I suppose? We can start with whoever wants to start on this one.
Well, I admit, as an English teacher, I am a little bit old school too. I believe that students should be annotating the text. That means interacting with it and underlining things, and they dig in. And studies have shown that they actually learn more from that. But I really love technology too, and we can use and innovate those things. And so I think it's a blend. It's a blend. We have to be really careful that we remember that human beings are successful because we are human interacting beings. And so that's where our strength comes. And technology can sometimes provide a barrier to that, and sometimes it can enhance that. So we need to be careful about what we mean when we say technology. I feel like technology is this, it's like when people say the media, right? You're like, oh, what does that mean? What is the definition of the media? But technology absolutely can be used to innovate and make things easier. I love that I can post, because I'm not a Canvas girl, I'm a Google Classroom girl. So some people like Canvas, I'm a Google Classroom. So I love that I can post something on Google Classroom, and my athletes who were gone for tennis yesterday can look on my Google Classroom and see some of the framework of what we did in class, and they have some of the things they can do. Now, can they ever replicate the incredible discussions that we had in class that day? No. But they can absolutely access some of the structural framework of that discussion. And so technology allows our students to be more successful, and I believe that it's part of the innovation. I do not think that it should ever replace the humanity of teachers, though. I do not think that it can just be a program where we just start listing different little videos you should watch and maybe email some things. I really believe strongly in improving our skill set and relationships with each other as human beings, not just siloing people into computer screens and having pseudo interactions. So that's my perspective on that.
Just really
Brad.
quick. Just really quickly, teachers will use it as a tool and as a resource, just like they use anything else that they can get a hold of as a resource. My hackles go up, and I cringe when I'm sitting in a legislative committee and I see another vendor bill for technology that's coming down. I need this many millions of dollars for this, because you know what? Students just have to sit in front of a computer and they teach themselves, and all the teacher needs to be, we don't need teachers. We just need someone in there to make sure that the computer's working, because those kids will teach themselves. And yes, kids are more innovative. Kids learn in a different way. Kids can have their cell phones in class and learn with them and use that as a tool, but software and technology does not teach kids. People facilitating, and teachers will adjust to technology that come in. If they're more like facilitators, great. They're still going to help the kids one-on-one.
I was just going to add, when you look at preparing students for the workforce, for example, any survey that's come out, any national survey or local survey, and you ask employers, what are you looking for in a new hire? And it is, they can collaborate, they can look you in the eye, they have communication skills, they can work in diverse groups to problem solve, they can work together on creative solutions to problems. And kind of towards the bottom of the list, they'll say, we'd like them to be, knowledgeable about current technology, but it is not in the top 5 consistently. And we are paying more attention to that, and we should pay more attention to that, where technology can enhance that and can enhance the instruction that a student receives. And the learning management systems like Canvas, when I taught at Utah State University, I was a better teacher because I had Canvas. I had all the materials right there at hand, and students could access them quickly. I could check their grades quickly. But again, it's the interactions. And we just cannot forget that we're preparing students not only for content, but for this future world. And more, the future world is telling us as educators, telling the governor and our office, we need people that can communicate and work together in diverse groups, in diverse settings, and problem solve to take my company to the next level.
And I would add to that, because at the end of the day, they all go home. And my goal, I want my kids to be college and career ready, but I also want them to be good moms, and I want them to be good dads, and then I want them to be kind citizens, and I want them to have the motivation and the knowledge to know how to advocate and to do something about that. And so that's what creates a better education system, is if we have those systems in place. And so technology can be tools, but they can't teach people how to be better in their relationships and in their families and in their lives.
Thank you. Final question for today. So we've had a lot of discussion about perhaps top-down approaches, pressures on teachers, the burnout. We had a discussion about keeping Congress and the federal government out of education. So should President Trump dissolve the U.S. Department of Education? What is your take on this question?
If you ask my boss, the answer is yes. If you ask me, I'm not sure. I don't agree with federal involvement in standards. They can't, by law, impose on our standards. I think the one thing that I would have to just see what the implications would be is for special education. My background's in special education. And the one thing that did happen at a federal level is the elevation of the need to address the needs of all of our students, including special education students. And regardless of what you think about IDEA, it's shown a spotlight on special education students. And are we in a position now where we could handle that ourselves? I hope so. But that would be my one hesitation, something I'd have to think about. And again, speaking on behalf of my boss, his answer would be yes.
Thank you.
I would have to say the unintended consequences need to be taken into account. And I think these sweeping, quick, they sound really nice. But the fact is, it wasn't so long ago, and I think that these things are still happening, that the communities and the value systems in certain communities felt like, those students of color, we gave them a school to go to, so we're good. So just let them do their own thing, and we'll pump all of our funding over here. It took a federal oversight to say that is wrong, and you need to do something about it. And by the way, we'll send the National Guard if you can't do it yourself. So that's part of our history, and I'm going to say it's part of our current reality. And so I would have to say that we can't just make these sweeping, sudden things. Are there things I feel like we need to retreat? Yes. Do I feel like we need to keep feeding the monster? No. But I think that there's a role, and our constitutional framers knew that they had a role, that each person and each community and each state and each nation has a role. And I'm going to say there's a role. To what degree is that role? I would like to have those conversations, absolutely. But to just make these sweeping things, let's just get rid of it just because it sounds good, the unintended consequences are not acceptable.
Thank you. Brad?
I'm okay with him letting the Secretary of Education go.
Oh, yes, I would agree with that. I would like to have an
Sorry if that offended
educator.
anyone.
I would like to have an educator serve that role.
What it really comes down to is, okay, so we dissolve that. It falls to the state. We've heard all the discussion on federal lands being used, other ways of funding education. As I've gone to our state legislators and I've asked, especially on the tax reform that's coming up and them looking at the earmarks for education and the income tax, I have not received an alternative yet of how to fund education. I hear a lot of things, and I even got from one state legislator said, well, Brad, don't you trust us? And I said, no, I don't. Not right now because you haven't presented anything. We need some very hard, concrete things that say we are going to take care of our kids this way before we get rid of $30 million worth of Title I funds that come into our state. I come from a highly impacted school. We would not have existed without those Title I funds. Now, if there's an alternative, AFT, we're all ears, but I haven't heard one yet that has been sound. We're all open to discussion, but we haven't heard it yet.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a really helpful panel. Covered a lot of ground, a lot of things to think about, and hopefully conversations to have afterwards. So let's give this panel a round of applause. you for being here.